In 2008, I had a life-altering near-death experience, also known as an NDE. And that shifted my perception from victimhood to sovereignty. For the first time, I've brought together the original 5 segments of my story into one continuous journey. This is a living exploration of what it means to breathe and not resist. I hope you enjoy this. The audio is not the most perfect audio because it was originally recorded on a very old Mac computer that was actually my son's. And although we have done everything we could to attempt to pull the best from that audio, we're just trusting the divine that it's exactly as it's intended to be. I hope you enjoy this. Much love. Until next time.
Hi there. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about my near-death experience because I've had several people inquire about that, and because it is such a kind of fascinating topic, I thought that it was worth recording. So, since several of you have written to me and asked for me to talk about this, I was going to do that today. My near-death experience happened on February 9th of 2008. Unlike a lot of other people's near-death experiences, mine was at my own hand. My the timing of this was such that I was in a state of tremendous depression, going through a lot, living in a foreign country in New Zealand at the time, with my young son, and just going through life, some pretty heavy life stuff. And at that time in my experience, really believing my thoughts and tremendously believing all of the victim stuff. Had kind of lived a life of 38 years of just thinking that everything was happening to me. And a victim of all of it, a victim of divorce, a victim of abandonment, a victim of molestation at a young age, a victim of, gosh, it just goes on and on. I mean, I can't, it's hard for me to even grab the stories anymore because I don't believe them. These things happened in the apparent story of Kelly, and yet there's no attachment to them anymore. Certainly, stories still arise about those things, but unlike when I was super depressed or anxious, I'm able to immediately inquire and just discard them. This computer may make a lot of background noise, so I apologize if that's what's happening here. So in this experience, I physically left the body. I felt a release from the body, and I in fact witnessed the body dying beneath me. It was as if, because I committed suicide in my SUV vehicle, it was as if the top of the car was completely gone, and there was this energy that was now me without a body floating above, witnessing what was happening below. There was no feeling that this should not be happening. There was no feeling that this should be stopped. There was no sadness or regret or remorse or even thoughts of the people that it would, of course, impact by me doing this. There was just this complete calm and peace and energy about being out of the physical body. And even looking down and seeing what was happening beneath me, there was no sadness about it. It's really hard to explain, and yet I can still feel it when I talk about it. The next thing that I recognized was that there was this pulling feeling. Even though there was no body, it was as if I was being pulled upward. And yet there was no up or down or left or right. Again, it's very hard to explain, but there was just this complete um, speed about it, and these sounds that were like popping sounds, but they weren't external for me, they were me. So intense and so loud. Um, I describe them like firecrackers and guns going off at the same time, so loud and just pop, 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 pop all around me, and this speed that the soul or this formless thing that I had become was moving through. I didn't see a tunnel. I hear many people speak of seeing a tunnel. That was not my experience. I went from this significant speed and intensity and vibration and this popping sound to nothing. And I was in this darkness. Everything around me was dark. It was like I was black. I became that. But it wasn't scary. It wasn't this terrifying, dark, scary thing. It was just like I had imploded into this color of nothingness. There was no fear. I didn't feel alone. I didn't feel left behind. I didn't feel trapped. There was no thoughts happening that I should go somewhere. There was no desire, if you will, to seek anything. I just became nothing. The next recognition that happened was this presence of peace, and again, this feeling as though I was in this space of nothingness and yet still being moved somewhere. The next experience was just this most intense, beautiful color that is indescribable. There is no real description of it. The palest pink is all I can link it to. I was not a lover of pink before this experience, but this love of this baby, fragile pink. Again, there's no color here to describe it. I've tried. Trust me, I've tried to to see this again. Um, Color was not flat as it is for us here, this linear experience of color that, I can paint it on something and say there's color. It wasn't that. It was that I became it. It wasn't separate from me. It wasn't an experience that I was seeing. It was me being that. And in this beautiful energy of feeling this, there was again just this joy and peaceful awareness that I was there. There's no time. That's an illusion, and it's something that we have here. And yet I try, when I shared this story, to explain that this experience for me was not 18 minutes that they say I was dead. It's a lifetime. It went on and on, and there was so much depth to it. And yet when I tell it in these linear terms, it's like I was here, and then I was there, and then I was here, and that's not how it was for me in the actual experience at all. Which is why often I don't like to talk about this, because what I feel it does on some level is create for other people this expectation of what their transition will be. And yet one of the things that I learned in this experience is it's a very unique experience, which is why when I returned to my physical body and I read about other people's near-death experiences and I read about the tunnel, there was no, well, I didn't get a tunnel. There was none of that, because I recognize it's such a unique experience. What happens for each person, I really believe from my own experience, is unique because it's what they hold to expect. If someone has an expectation that death is fearful and scary, they may in fact create that for themselves. We simply return from a physical body to a vibration, and in that return, we're still creators. We're still able to create. We're still able to manifest an outcome simply by holding on to it. There was this knowing that I was safe and loved, that everything was okay, that there was nothing to feel sad about or regret about. And yet again, even in sharing that, it's almost like I was having these thoughts, and yet I wasn't. There was no thinker there. And I know that's hard to wrap the head around unless you've had the experience yourself. The next recollection I have is this, as if there is this knowing without a speaking, whether you call it telepathy or whatever you want to phrase it as. I don't get tied up in these things with language. There was just this knowing that I was going somewhere else, and then I was there. At this stage, I started to recognize that I could play around with, for lack of better words, this energy that I had become, and by simply holding a thought, which again, it's not thought, so it's such a tough one to explain, I could go places. And again, since my near-death experience and reading up on things, I've learned that this is very familiar to people who astral travel or have out-of-body experiences. By coming out of the physical body and holding the thought, I want to be there, and feeling that there, they become that. That's the best explanation I can give to you for it. My next experience was very beautiful. I was taken to, or shown, a space that was like a big stone room, very massive and very beautiful and very ornate, and certainly a place that was of high respect. Many things happened in this room, some of which I hold close to my heart, others I'm willing to share. One of the things that I was shown in this room was my map, or my soul plan, laid out on this big, massive, marble-like table. Again, nothing like what we have here. And what I saw in that was my own creation of all of this that I had previously referred to as bad. All these experiences that I had labeled wrong or inappropriate or shouldn't have happened. My molestation by my grandfather when I was 3 years old. My parents' divorce. My own divorce. My son being born early. All these things that I had labeled as bad now had no label at all. They just were. They were experiences in this map that I could now see. And each of the souls that I had these experiences with were part of it. And in this experience, one of the big breakthroughs and recognitions for me was that the souls that had, quote unquote, hurt me the most were actually closest to me in my soul family. My grandfather, who is no longer alive, that molested me when I was 3 years old, is in my soul family. And I had an agreement with him to carry out that experience. I'll have to explain in another video, because it would take too much time to go into too much depth, why we incarnate. Because when you hear this, for many of you, and then for some of you it may not arise, the question comes, why would I come here and choose and map out to be molested or to be abused or to be neglected or starved, that creates this anger inside of the human being that says this shouldn't be happening. So I'll have to do another video on that, because that's a whole other segment of itself. As I looked at this map, one of the things that occurred for me was I experienced each of the events again. And as there's no time, again, it was so fast. It was as if seconds were just passing, and I was born again, and I was 3 again, and I was 7 again, and I was experiencing all these things. And yes, some of the experience was me doing things that would I label unkind or mean, and yet in this vision of my experiences, there was no punishment or bad girl, you shouldn't have done that, or this is wrong, or it shouldn't have been that way, and you're here to face your demons or your sins. None of that was happening, because there is none of that. There's nothing we can do here that is wrong. This is all mapped. This is all planned. This is all determined in advance. And so how can you penalize someone for something that you agree to from a soul perspective? This review was for no one but myself. For me to recognize that I'm perfect, I'm whole, I'm complete, I'm this amazing, eternal being just as you are, and that there's nothing I can do here that is wrong, even the act of killing myself. And as this awareness crept up in this experience, I didn't realize that I'm still on a 15-minute limit. So, and I'm going to use the microphone because I don't know that it's recording sound-wise that great. So hopefully this will help a little bit. So as my awareness crept in that there was nothing that I could do wrong, and there was no sin, or that I wasn't here for any penalty or a life review to mend my ways, or go into a place of purgatory or anything like that. And just know, in all of this, there was never any thinking going on. That's what's so hard to wrap the mind around, that the thinkingness goes away. So there was no conceptual thought like, where am I going from here? Or, ooh, is this a life review? Does that mean I'm going to some hell? None of that was happening. There was just this allowing and being and awareness going on. It's the only way I can explain it. Again, I know that it's really hard, unless you've had an experience like this, to tangibly feel this. So I'm not attached to any outcomes from this. I'm simply sharing because many have asked about it. The next experience, for lack of better words, again for me, was knowing that there was a return to this physical presence for me. Not because there were things I necessarily had to do or finish or wrap up. Not that there's any karma to tie. There was just this knowingness that the agreements I had with my son were still in effect. That there were things that we would do together, and that I could offer in the apparent story of others this knowing that we are perfect whole beings with infinite wisdom, that Earth is not a classroom. We're not here to work through karma. We're not here to eradicate things from the past. We're not here to make amends for our ancestors' behaviors. All these things that I had grown up believing. That we're here, and again, I'll have to do a whole separate video on this, but we're here for experience, and that's it. The next thing was this beautiful, again, pink energy around, and this being that I knew without having any reason to know why I knew was Archangel Gabriel. Now, I had no tie to angels before this experience other than the things that I learned in my Catholicism upbringing. Certainly, I was always drawn to the mystical aspects of Catholicism. I loved the apparitions of Mary, Medjugorje. I loved any of the things on Padre Pio, and so I definitely will admit that that had always been part of my experience and one of the things I grasped onto in Catholicism. However, I never knew much about any of the angels other than those experiences. So for Archangel Gabriel to be the one that I had my experience with is to me somewhat unique. I was, for lack of better words, again led, knowing that it was time for me to return to the physical body. And this experience of vibration and shaking, popping sounds again, and this pushing feeling, almost like I was being popped out of a cannon, if you will. And the next thing I knew, there was this loud, like, popping sound, and there was an awareness that I was back in the physical body. And there was pain, although there was no pain with the leaving of the body or the transitioning or what we call the death. Absolutely zero pain with the death. I watched the body go through pain, but I felt none of it, which is a gift, I think, to offer to people who are watching loved ones transition and thinking that they're suffering. The soul doesn't remember any of that. It just doesn't. It's a witness to it. And even if the physical being is still inside the body saying, I'm in pain, as soon as the physical being leaves that body, there's no remembrance of that. I promise you. I experienced it. This popping sound and returning to the physical body, being told that I was dead, going to the hospital, being airlifted because I was on a small island off the coast of Auckland in New Zealand and had to be airlifted to a hospital, the closest one being in Auckland, and being in an emergency room. Forever changed. Nothing was the same from that moment forward. And I will do follow-up videos to this because there's so many little details that I'm not able to get in this, especially because YouTube's limiting my little updates to 15 minutes. There's so many little stories in each one of these things that happened over the coming weeks after my near-death experience. A profound thing that was known to me from the angels before I left that I have carried forward in this experience, and I return to it and refer to it often, especially when this human stuff gets heavy. Your only role here is to breathe and not resist. Everything else is predetermined. You feel you have a choice in this. You're offered chocolate, vanilla ice cream, and there's some thinking here that you've chosen chocolate. Scientists have already begun to explore and understand that the brain already knows before the body responds of what the choice will be. This isn't just new age yah-yah stuff. The scientists are catching up with this. They're catching up with this, and more people are having near-death experiences. Transitional experiences, out-of-body experiences, whatever you want to call it. I'm not unique in this. I'm not special. Many things happened in the hospital and the weeks after my near-death experience, one of the things that happened was an immediate awareness that I was not the same. I'd killed myself, so of course I was under suicide watch. Doctors and nurses are coming in and asking how I'm feeling. As I had overdosed on medication, there was a part of this story of Kelly thinking, I am insane. I have damaged my brain. There are dead people in this room with me that I can see. There are angelic beings in this room with me that I can see. I'm hearing things. The walls are like molecules that are moving. I can put my hand through them. The ceilings are just these little vibrating dots moving really fast. I can see right through them to the sky. The doctor says to me, "Are you seeing or hearing anything that you shouldn't be?" And now I see the irony in that question. So hilarious. And it was the first opportunity for me to trust this. I'm told by my guide Bernadette, tell them no, or they'll lock you up. Here I am, seeing this Indian woman as if it's hard as physical body as I see someone today, talking to me, knowing that nobody else is seeing her. Tell them you don't see anything that you shouldn't, or they'll lock you up. I'm wanting to run through the hallways and throw flowers and tell everyone how beautiful life is and how amazing this experience is, and I am in euphoria, complete euphoria. And I just killed myself. I'm seeing these things. So there's all this insane stuff going on. Am I insane? Do I believe that I'm insane? Am I schizophrenic now? Have I done something to damage my brain? Or is this real? Who do I trust? It was the first opportunity I had to trust something that was so outside of myself and yet within me the whole time. So I said to the doctor, "No, doctor, I'm fine." There's many follow-up videos to come to this. I had what I refer to as 3 angelic experiences while in the hospital. I was moved from the emergency room to another ward in the hospital where I was kept for observation. In New Zealand, they only keep you for 24 hours, which is kind of crazy. But several things happened that I'd like to share because I think they're pivotal in this, and I've been wanting to document them anyway. But I'm getting close to my 15 minutes and being kicked off again. So I'll wrap this second segment up with this. You are perfect, whole and complete. You're beautiful. You are a gift. And you are never, ever this. Until my next video, with much love, signing off. So I'm kind of on a roll today, and usually I space these out, but some energy is really kicked in, and I'm just going with it. I'm just going with it and recording like a maniac. So I'll just carry forward from my near-death experience, and this will be part 3. As I mentioned in part 2, many things happened in the hospital after I was back in my physical body. Certainly one of the first things was this awareness that something had changed, remembering not having this experience of seeing dead people or talking to dead people and seeing molecules and walls move. And now having all of that was certainly a big shift. Questioning my own self. Have I damaged my brain? Am I insane? And listening to the guidance around me, which is saying, tell them you're okay. And then, of course, the euphoria that I'm alive and that this is all beautiful and that we should all skip through life joyously. All of this is happening simultaneously. I was like a nerve ending that was completely exposed, and all of the stimulation was happening. Kind of a ping pong ball effect, really, of the energy. And as I'm laying in this emergency room, waiting to be given my own room and under observation, they kept the curtain open, of course, because I was still under suicide watch. And so I'm taking in all of the stuff that's going on in the emergency room, and I'm sure those of you who have had an experience in the emergency room and know that it's very busy and there's lots of hustling and bustling going on. My first angel experience was in the emergency room. I'm laying on this stretcher, and I'm propped up a little bit with a few pillows, and I'm just sitting there, again, like a nerve ending, exposed to all this experience, like a newborn baby, really. And this girl is brought in a wheelchair, and her body is just flopping. She's flopping all over, and I can tell that she's intoxicated, but it didn't feel like alcohol. It was abnormal to me, and I've never experienced drugs. I've never taken a drug other than the ones I took to kill myself, which were antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, and sleeping pills. I've never taken a hallucinogenic. I've never used marijuana. I've never done any of those drugs. So I just knew that something was off, and it wasn't alcohol, but she was definitely having some floppy, crazy things going on. The man that brought her in was her boyfriend, and he's speaking to the nurse behind the counter, and he's angry, and he's exclaiming that he had gone to work, and she had met up with these friends that he didn't approve of, and taken something, and he suspected that she had taken some form of an acid. So I'm listening to this, and I'm watching her, and I'm observing all of it, and in an instant, while he's conversing with the nurse, and neither one of them are paying attention to her flopping around in the wheelchair, she gets up and she locks eyes with me. And she goes completely straight, walks completely straight, no floppiness, no erratic behavior that was going on before, intensely looking into my eyes, walks straight to me, looks right into my eyes, and says, "I see you." And then in that instant, she just flopped on top of me in the gurney. And at this stage, they took notice that she was up and she wasn't in the chair anymore, and they come rushing over and start pulling her away, and she begins to vomit. She's very sick. All of this happens over my body. In an instant, she was lucid. All of that I saw in her was gone. She connected with me, and she said, "I see you." And I knew in that moment it was not her there. What has happened to me in this experience is all of my senses were awakened. I don't care what you call it. I don't care if you refer to me as psychic. I don't really care. I have no attachment to what other people think of me in this experience. The only thing that has kept me from telling my story sooner is that I have a young boy who did not know that his mother killed herself. It's taken me 4 years to really work through that and come to grips with the fact that, like everyone else, he scripted this. His soul chose me as his mother, just as I chose him as my son. And any shame in what I chose to do in this story of Kelly is ridiculous. And by holding shame and not sharing my truth, I am in effect saying that this is a sin, that what I did was wrong. I certainly do not want anyone to go out there and hurt themselves. I certainly do not wish anyone to commit suicide to try and tap into some psychic ability. That is no intention of mine by sharing this story. In fact, quite the opposite. My senses were awakened, and all of a sudden, all of the senses that I was gifted in this physical body, that you were also gifted, were awakened. clairvoyance, clear seeing, clairaudience, clear hearing, clairsentience, clear knowing or feeling, empathy, like nobody's business. I've listened to other people speak about this, and I've listened to gurus talk about this, and one of the things that seems to be a common theme that I hold to here is that if this is arising in my experience of now, I'm going to love it. I could resist this. I could hide this part of myself, try to be something that I'm not, try to put a label on it that doesn't exist. The reality in this moment of now, which is our only truth, is that this is here until it's not. Others may not have this experience, and that's okay. It doesn't lessen it for myself. There is this stigma in life around people who have psychic abilities or powers, I've heard them called. In fact, when people come to see me, they often have this preconceived conception of what I'm going to look like. Am I going to have a magic ball, and am I going to pull out tarot cards, and is my house going to look new agey? And I am a soccer mom. I am a corporate worker. I am a community member. I am no different than anyone else. I have superior high integrity about what I do. I hold myself the most accountable for anything that I tell anyone. This is not about trying to be special. This is not about trying to be something that other people aren't. This is about sharing my truth in this now moment. I could wake up tomorrow and all this could be gone, and that too would be perfect. There's no past, present, or future. There's only now. And in this now moment, as I'm talking to you, this is my experience. It's not a curse. It's not a gift. It's just here. Like anything else, if it arrives, I'm going to love it. Otherwise, I'm resisting, and that's my own pain. So that is the story of the first angel on my experience of hospital stay. I finally did get a room, and I'll share that in other videos. It was the middle of the night, and I was finally moved to a ward, not knowing where I was going. I met 2 other angels on that journey, and again, I'll share those in other videos. But I think what it all boils down to is life is beautiful. It's a gift. It is to be held with joy. It is to be experienced with joy. And whatever is arising in this moment, whether it be a drug-addicted person who's stumbling towards you, or a homeless person who's reaching out their hand, when you look in their eyes, you will only ever see you, because that's all that's ever been there. I see you. Until next time. This is a continuation in my near-death experience series. This is part 4. And this is recognition of the second angel I encountered in the emergency room or the hospital after my near-death experience. So, as I was given a room in the hospital, I was taken to a ward, and it was nighttime at this stage, and everyone was asleep, including myself. The orderly rolled my bed to a ward, and I was put into a curtained room with 3 other women. At this stage, I of course woke up and was kind of curious as to where I was and what was going on around me, and there was nothing to see. It was nighttime. Everyone had their curtains drawn and were sleeping, and so I was in my own space, and now wide awake. And a sense of vulnerability came over me. An awareness started to happen. Although the euphoria was still very much a part of my experience, there was this story that started to creep into my mind, and this recognition that I had just killed myself started to set in. All of a sudden, all the numb, depressed emotions were able to be felt, because for months before this, the depression was doing all of the talking. And in the shedding of that depression, I was now very much conscious of the emotions behind what my actions had just caused. Here I am, middle of the night, in a strange hospital room. Had no family or anyone there. My partner at the time was home with my son and his children, and that's where he needed to be. And there was just this feeling of being like a newborn child with all these emotions and thoughts and feelings and dead people and just this explosion of energy inside of me that I didn't know what to do with. So as I sat there in my bed feeling all of this, I began to cry. Wasn't any feeling of sadness for myself. It was more of what had I done to these people I love in my life? Wow, for the first time I was feeling what they would feel. My family, my partner at the time, my son, all of my friends who would experience the fact that I just tried to kill myself. And I did. I did kill myself. There was this knowing that there was going to be pain for other people in this. And it was the first time that I really was with that knowing. So as I sat in my bed and just gently allowed these feelings to come out, I started to hear movement in the room. And next to me, to my right, because I was on the end and I had windows on the other side, to my immediate right was another bed behind a curtain, and this is angel number 2. There was this horrific sound coming from this curtain. I can't even begin to describe it. It was as if someone was literally, and I apologize for the graphic TMI comment, but I'm just going to share so that you really understand what I was experiencing. Someone was literally choking on their own fluids. It was like a horrific pneumonia was in the lungs, and you could hear this liquid moving and being stuck, and this person literally choking on it. I didn't know what to do with that, and all of my emotions at this stage, I wasn't grossed out. I was in this complete empathy state where part of me wanted to pull the curtain back and make sure they were okay, and yet an awareness that that would have been inappropriate. So I decided to get out of bed, and I wandered with my blanket down to a visitor room that was of course vacant at this time of the night, and I sat on the couch, and at this stage my whole body just began to tremor and shiver, and nerves kicked in, and certainly the drugs in my body were wreaking havoc as well and wanting to detox out. I don't know how long I sat in there crying, and a nurse finally came down the hall to ask if I was okay and needed anything, and I asked her where I was, because I still didn't know where I was. And she said, well, sweetie, the hospital's full tonight, and they waited a while to get you a room, and you are in the infectious disease ward. So they take someone who's committed suicide, you have to laugh, and put them in a room with patients who have infectious diseases. I asked her then, and the woman to my right, which of course she couldn't tell me, confidentiality and all that. She said, I assure you, we've put you in a room where no one is contagious. So, with that, she asked me to get back to bed, and I did. As I went down the hall and climbed back into my bed, I knew there was not going to be any more sleep for that night, and by this time, you could see the light coming through the window. As people began to awake and pull their curtains back, the mind has already made up all kinds of assumptions about what's going to be seen behind the curtain, right? You're hearing all these sounds, and I had already made up my mind that this person that was choking to death was someone elderly and very sick. Not sure why, but that's what my mind said. As the curtains are pulled back, I look to my right, and there I see the most precious, tiny, petite little Asian girl. She must have been 18, 19 years old. Bless her heart. She had cystic fibrosis. This was her life experience, in and out of hospitals, dealing with this, treatments and breathing things and tubes. And as I sat back into my bed, just really feeling for her, I saw this little body get out of her bed and walk over to the window and look out. She put her hands on the railing next to the window and kind of pushed herself up like she was trying to lean out the window. I'll never get that image out of my head. Like, this has been her life experience, hospitals. And as she turned around to go back to her bed, she very slowly paused at the end of my bed and looked right into my eyes. And she very faintly said, I see you. I still get chills when I talk about it. She then went and climbed back into her own bed. What does one do with that? There I am being that. There I am being that young girl. There was never a me and a her. There were never two. And in that instant, just for a very brief second, I was reminded of that again. There's yet one more angel in the same story, in the same room, and I'll share that in another video because I'm close to my time again. As the day opened up, food began arriving, doctors visiting. The emotional energy of all that was going on was very heightened. But just that flicker of reminder to remember that you never know what the experience of the person next to you is. The mind will make all kinds of judgments and stories. It'll elaborate, it'll fill in. You know, the curtain's drawn all the time between us and life. But it's not a real curtain, it's a veil of the mind. deceiving and perceiving and constructing, and it's never true. That adorable, sweet little Asian woman who got out of her bed and stretched towards the window was never sick. She was never all that icky, horrible sadness I was hearing in her. Beautiful. What a gift. What a gift to know. So I will go ahead and wrap this up and record the final segment of my near-death experience, meeting Angel 3. Thanks for following me on this journey. And the journey continues. Angel 3. So if you followed along, you've heard where we are in this story. And that's how it feels. It feels like a story. It was only 4 years ago, this past February, but just so amazing, everything that's happened since that time. I'm glad I'm finally getting around to recording these, and my only hesitation in doing so has been making sure my son is old enough to understand all of this, and that he's not going to hear it from some kid on the playground, that he's going to hear it from his mom, which he has. So as the day continued to unfold and the visits were happening and the doctors were coming and going, directly across from me in the bed on the other end next to the window was a beautiful, beautiful elderly woman. She had to be in her late 80s, early 90s, and she was so just, you could tell she was a dignified woman, and that in her younger days she was gorgeous because she still had such a beautiful skin and bone structure, and she was dressed in these adorable pajamas with lace around them, and she was not in a hospital gown. She had cards and flowers around her, and you could tell that she was very loved. Again, see how the mind's filling in. She had her own blankets on her bed. They weren't the hospital blankets. And cards all around her, and it looked as though she'd been there some time. She was just sweet and talked to anyone who came into the room. Everyone was a dear. Beautiful New Zealand accent, and just precious. And that's what I called her. Precious Angel number 3. As I laid in my bed across from her, waiting to hear if I was going to get discharged and what the plan of action was, we all were kind of in the same position of just waiting. It's what you do in the hospital. And I saw her stirring in her bed, and she said, "I'm so cold." And she pulled her hot water bottle out. And I said, "Would you like me to fill it for you?" And she said, "Oh, would you be a dear? I've been waiting for the nurse for a long time." So I got up and I took the hot water bottle from her, and I wandered down the hall and found the coffee station and filled it for her. And just took my time, wandering back to my room. And as I got to the door, entering was a beautiful young woman. Turned out to be her daughter. And as we both walked in the room together, her daughter greeted her and sat down in the chair next to her. So I decided not to disturb them. They were in an embrace and they were, saying their hellos. So I just kind of went over to my bed with her hot water bottle and sat down. giving them space and not paying attention to what they were doing. I just kind of looked out the window and flipped through magazines, trying to keep myself busy. And I heard the daughter say to her mother, "You know, you can't go home." So her mother must have been asking about going home. At this stage, I started to realize that there was senility going on, and that Precious did not remember that she didn't leave here. And the daughter handled it beautifully and just, kind of reminded her mom. And then the next question came, obviously, about her husband. And I heard the daughter very gently say, "No, Mommy, Daddy left us a long time ago. He's in heaven now." And this sweet, precious woman put her hands over her eyes and cried like it was the first time she had ever heard this news. And I watched the daughter just sink into her body, having to remind her mother, probably for the millionth time, that Dad wasn't coming back. Your husband's not coming back. It wasn't long. It wasn't long at all, in fact. And Precious wiped her eyes and was on to the next topic and had already forgotten the whole conversation. It was on to what she'd had for breakfast and what she had in mind for the day. And watched the beautiful exchange between them without being, in their business. And at some stage, the daughter kind of looked over and saw the beautiful pink, I forgot to mention, it was a pink heart-shaped hot water bottle, was sitting on the end of my bed. And the daughter said, "Oh, is that Mother's?" And I said, "Yes, it is. I filled it for her. She was waiting for the nurses and she was cold." And the daughter said, "Lovely." And she came over and she got it and she took it to her mom's bed and tucked it in. And her mother said, "Oh no, honey, I want her to do it," and pointed to me. So I got up and I walked over to her bed and I pulled back her flannel between the sheet and the flannel and I gently tucked it in. And I just looked at her. So she's just such a sweet lady with her beautiful little lace pajamas and still little wet teardrops from her cry. And as I looked at her, again, it was like time just stopped. And she looked me right in the eyes. And she very gently said, "I see you." I don't know why it took 3 angels to say that to me that day. It really doesn't matter. Something clicked for me in that moment. Each time it did, but that third one really just clicked. There was an awareness in that space that every kind act that we do for another, yes, we're doing it for them, but we're doing it for us too. It's a sign of love. It's a sign of seeing the self. I was fortunate to get discharged that day. I was sent home in clothes from the hamper at the hospital. True story, because my clothes were damaged. Half of them had been cut off of the body. And the nurse went down and got the most horrendous dress she could possibly find, and I didn't care. and I think there were flip-flops and maybe some capri pants that I put underneath the dress. All of this from Lost and Found. I didn't care. I did not care. I could have danced out of that hospital. I could have sang. I could have kissed every person that I ran into. I just was so joyous to be alive. Just sharing this today, the whole story of it, even though I've done it in such a rapid detail. I mean, there, like I said, if I were to share the whole experience, it would take hours. There's only fragments and pieces of this that I've shared. Even after finishing the first recording, I said to myself, I didn't even get to mention the smells and the sounds that I experienced. Not that I can, there's nothing here to equate them to. But I will say this, there's not a day that goes by in the experience of Kelly that I'm not reminded to remember. Even when I get in moments of human suffering like everyone else, joy is ultimately the center and the core of it. It's my perception that's creating that sadness. These angels that appeared to be in the hospital and sick or stuck and diseased are all in my mind. They're actresses and actors in my play, playing their part perfectly, and I'm all of them. So I'll follow up in a few days with other videos, because that's probably my son texting me to pick him up right now. And those videos will be primarily about the weeks following my near-death experience, kind of things that happened, because that was a really exciting time. Again, the vibration that I was in for several weeks after this was just phenomenal, and things were coming through that one just can't even fathom. And slowly a balance came about. Certainly this is still a part of my experience, but it's not as heightened as it was, right after this happened. So I will continue to share, and I do, again, if anyone has questions, or if there's something I've shared in these videos that you would like me to elaborate on, or whatever, don't be afraid to message me. I don't have to use your name when I reply. I can just reply to the question and keep an anonymity. But I do want to share openly in this experience. It's there's no shame or blame or anything to hide in this, so it's a gift to give, and I'm happy to do so. So thank you for joining the journey, and until next time.
Thanks for joining on this journey today. We explore a lot of things here on the channel. There's tons of free content in all of our playlists, as well as other interviews of me explaining this exact near-death experience with different hosts. So please subscribe, like, hype us up, whatever you feel comfortable doing. And thanks for being here. Breathe and don't resist. The rest is taken care of. Much love. Until next time.